Hello. Hi. So, how are you doing? Yeah. So, any questions from whatever was done last class on DP, or even anything that was done before that?
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, I have a question in the problem set.
Okay.
Uh, Sir, in problem set 3, question number 1, uh, we have to identify the index positions I and j to obtain the maximum sum. We have to find only two positions I and j, or many positions such that the sum can be maximized.
Just one second. Let me just look at this thing. So, in assignment 3 or assignment 4.
Problem set, sir.
Oh, in problem set. Sorry. One second. What's problem set? In problem set 3. I mean, so you are not understanding the question, or you are asking what is the exactly that is asked?
What is asked actually? What we
Uh,
have to?
I mean, see, you don't have to do, you do, I mean, okay, let me just, I'm still not be able to open it. Problem set 3, right? Yeah, fine. So in the third question, is it?
First question number 1.
Given an array of n numbers, each of which have maybe positive, negative, even efficient number to identify index ij, obtain the maximum sum of. No, out of the all the possible ij's that are there,
Hmm.
index j of. Yeah, and your job is to kind of, I mean, add those two sums basically, right?
Sir, I am asking, we have to find only two index I and j, or uh, we have to maximize the sum, and in that case, it may involve many index.
Yeah. So for this problem, then you just have to ask. You have to just find one of them. But in the exam, I will ask for all.
No, sir. In this
This
case, uh,
Yeah,
we
this is
have
a
to find.
problem set, right? This is something example. So if you, I mean, try it out, right? It doesn't matter what is the exact thing. Okay, fine. You have two questions, right? Can you find one of them among all the possible ij's that maximizes this sum? Output one of them. That is one question. And another question is that all the ij's that maximizes the sum, output all of them. Both of them are valid questions, and why don't you try to solve both of them?
Okay.
I mean, this is the problem set, right? You don't have to solve it. It's for your practice, right? Of course, in the exam or something, when it is
Sir,
asked, that time it's a different thing. That time we might have to be much more clearer and all of those things. But for this
okay.
setting, I mean, this is just a indication of what is the. I mean, it's just a problem set. So, so yeah, I understand that there are two versions of that one can ask, and either of them is, I mean, either of them is a valid question, and you should try to solve both of them,
Okay, sir.
right?
Sir, in question 11, in that same
Okay.
problem set,
Yeah.
sir, the sum, multiplication, etc. can be done in order one step.
Each j is the integer, and each interval node is one of the standard operations. Yeah. So all of them can be done in order one step.
Sir, but in this case, the brackets are not given. So I mean the
The
answers.
brackets are there. I mean, you have an arithmetic expression, right? The arithmetic expression contains the brackets.
Okay, sir.
The operations that are there are this set of operations. The brackets will just tell you which will be done first and which will be done after that.
Okay, sir.
But you understand that that can also be, yeah.
So I had a doubt on problem set 2.
Problem set 2. Okay.
The graph theoretic one.
Just one second. Let me find out. Open it first. Problem set 2.
In the question number 12,
Yeah.
so I couldn't find a way to approach it basically.
So that, okay, you can unable to approach it also. Okay. So that for any graph can be partitioned into two vertex sets. Okay. You cannot you cannot approach it. Okay, so this is a very interesting question. Okay, so I will actually let me go into this one a little bit right now. So are you all? So let me. Why don't you all kind of try to read that question, and if anybody has some solutions, why don't you please let me know? So basically, you have a graph, right? G, say V comma E, where so size of V equals to say N and size of E equals to M. I'm just using it for our purpose. And my goal is to partition V into two parts, disjoint partition V1 and V2, such that if I think of the graph, right? You have a V1, I have a V2, I have some edges within, I have some edges within V1 and some edges within V2, and I have of course some edges goes across, right? So this set of edges is called E of V1. This set of edges is called E of V2. And the question is that prove that there exists a partition, right? Meaning partition meaning this thing, right? Such that the total set of edges in V1 plus total set of edges in V2 is less than or equal to total set of edges. So maybe I will just write it total set of edges in the whole thing, which means M, right? So M by 2. Okay, prove that there exists a partition. Is everybody clear with this? Could anybody solve this particular question?
Yes.
You have solved it? Can you
Yes.
give a quick one-word thing? What do you do?
So I don't have a one-word solution.
Okay, no, not one-word solution, but some hint. I don't want you to give the whole thing right away. So it's a greedily constructed.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
fine. Okay. Fine. Anybody else? Well, I would like to really know how many of you have actually tried this problem. Okay, I really want to see this one. I mean, because this has been there for some time, right? And so, so this is problem what? Which one? Problem 11, right? No, what can you just say?
Problem 12.
Problem 12 in problem set 2, right?
Yeah.
Just Just one second. Again, I will really ask you guys to please be honest about your answers, okay, so that I can have a feel of what's going on. Need to do this polling. Yeah, do you see these polls?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so 18 people have answered, and out of it, 8 of you have not even tried at all, and 3 of you have just tried a little bit. So, I mean, see, I'm going to give the answers to this question right now. But again, I mean, you guys are all grown-up people, so please take it seriously. This is something, I mean, we don't do this. I mean, we don't do this courses just for, I mean, just for fun. I mean, we really expect you guys to do something, and I'm a bit disappointed, honestly speaking. Yeah, I mean, I am, yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, so I was actually expecting a lot from the BStat batches, because this is the first time I'm teaching BStat batches in ISI. Before that, of course, I have taught in CMI BMath courses for quite some time. But I was very happy with CMI BMath courses and batches, and I'm a bit unhappy with this whole thing. So because I'm not sure, is it because of the COVID issue, or is it just a lack of enthusiasm from your part? Um, because it seems that either you guys don't care about this thing. I mean, I mean, so people who don't care about it, I mean, I can make a small, simple request. Why don't you write to the authority saying that, see, we don't think that this course is useful. Why don't you please remove this course from our syllabus? Because this is kind of, I think, only people who are interested should take this course. Nobody should be forced to take a course which is against their interest. I can clearly see there are some people who are interested in taking the course, and I'll be happy to teach them rather than, I mean, teaching people who are not interested. First of all, there are only 20 people who are coming for this class, and out of which also 11 of them are not solving it. I don't know. I mean, I'm actually really disappointed. Anyways, I mean, that's not my job. Okay, so here is it. So this is a question that for people who have tried, they will really appreciate this solution. Okay, so so here is this question. It's a purely combinatorial question. Anybody with any amount of interest in mathematics would really appreciate it. So you have this graph, and the question is that, can you partition the vertex set into two halves such that sum of them is less than sum of the edges in between within those parts is less than m by 2, right? So I see that there are 3 people or 2 people who could solve it, and one of you just told me And the other one also, whoever solved it, maybe can you unmute yourself and tell, I mean, is it also through the greedy approach? Hello? Who was the two people told that they could solve it? Hello?
Sir, I have solved it using just induction.
Just induction. Okay, okay, okay. I would like to, yeah. So that is another way of doing it. Perfect. So I am going to give you a proof which is neither of those two. Okay. Although whatever I'm going to do now, they can be pulled to greedy approach or induction. Particularly the greedy approach can be made. So this approach, so this is something I teach in my discrete math course a lot, and I'm sure, I mean, particularly you guys will appreciate this thing a lot. So what happens? How do you prove an existence of something? If I ask you to prove some existence of something, that something exists, or such a partition exists, or a particular kind of graph exists, how do you do it? Right? One natural way of doing it is to construct one and say, see, here is something that has a property. Correct? Like I know that your friend did it. He constructed a partition. Okay. So those are what we call as constructive solution. Constructive solution. But there is another way of solving it. It's called existential solution. Basically, this means that I will prove that such a solution exists. I will prove that such a partition exists, but I will not give you a solution, not give you a partition. Okay. So how do you do that? Okay. And it is done by simple use of probability. The main idea is that if I can somehow set up a probability, a random experiment, okay, and prove that probability that a particular kind of structure exists is strictly greater than 0. What does it mean? It means that it is strictly greater than 0. That means such a thing can happen, right? So let me do it here, okay? So here is the experiment that I do, a random. So I randomly partition the vertex at V into two sets, V1 and V2. Now, what does the randomly mean? Meaning for all V in the vertex at V, with probability half, I put V in V1, and otherwise, or meaning the opposite probability, I put V in V2. Okay, so I end up putting it inside. Right? Now I want to know, so I have done a random experiment. Now what I want to know is that what is the probability that the H set of V1 plus H set of V2, I mean, the absolute value, this is less than m by 2. If I can prove that this probability is strictly greater than 0, what does it mean? What does it mean?
That a partition would exist.
So such a partition exists. It is strictly greater than 0. This is what is crucial. Okay, the very fact, I will write it here, it is not equal to. Okay, so there exists a partition that will do that. Now question is that how do I prove this thing? Okay, so there are various ways of doing this kind of proofs, probabilities, calculation. Okay, some of them are using some beautiful mm, concentration inequality, something, somehow, in some other ways you can do it. But here, let me do a very simple one. What is the expected value of size of V1 plus size of V2? What is this? Let's see here. So that means I am counting all the edges that are within V1. I am counting all the edges that are within V2. So what is it that I am not counting? Right? I am not counting all the edges of the form UV, where U is in V1 and V is in V2, or the opposite, right? V is in V1 and U is in V2, right? So this is a complement. Okay, this is not of this. So what is the probability that a particular, so what is this quantity? Now let's see, by your linearity of expectation and all of those things, what can I do? I am saying that this is exactly equal to sum over all UV in the edge set of V, the original verb edge set, right? The indicator variable or the probability, right? So this is the probability or the expectation, whatever you want to call it here, of the probability that, let's say, what is the probability? Probability that UV either is in, both of them are in V1, or UV, both of them, I mean, I should not have put a bracket here, both of UV and V1 are in V2, right?
Yes, sir.
Fine, everybody with me?
Yes, sir.
So this is summation over UV in expected of V. Now what is this quantity? What is this probability? What is this probability?
So 1/4. 1/4.
1/4 plus 1/4.
1/4 plus 1/4 is half, because these are disjoint things, of course, and this happens with probability 1/4. U must be in V1 with probability half, V must be in V1 with probability half. They are independent, so with probability 1/4 this happens, and similarly with probability 1/4 this happens, right? So total probability of this, of both of them, A or B, because A or B is mutually disjoint, they are mutually exclusive. So this is just but half, right? Which is m/2. So the expected value is m/2. What does it mean? If it is, expectation is, you can think of it in two different ways. You don't have to go to probability right now. But from here, I mean, this is expectation is nothing but averaging, right? From which you can say that, oh, that means there exists a partition such that this quantity is less than m/2, right? Or you can do the opposite, that the same thing, that from here, this, you get this quantity. That, because if the expectation is something, then probability that it is less than or equal to the expectation has to be strictly greater than 0. Right? So magically, without even telling you what a partition is, what the partition is, I have convinced you that there exists a partition.
Sir, if we apply Markov, we'll get 0.
You don't need to apply Markov. It is just the average, right? Expectation is an average. Don't apply Markov here. If the average of 10 objects is 5, then there must be at least one object with less than 5, right? Less than or equal to 5.
Yes, sir.
So this is what I am using. Here we are not using any non-trivial concentration results. The simple fact of probability and expectation. Simple fact. Okay, so I mean, if you are not familiar with this one, I can say that if expected value of some variable is t, then prove that probability that x is less than or equal to expected value of x. Rather, I mean, I don't even need to have t, or maybe let me just write it here. If this is equal to t, the probability that t is strictly greater than 0. And you can of course say the opposite also. Okay, the probability that x is greater than or equal to t is strictly greater than 0. Now this equality, here the two things that are very essential is this equality, meaning I am allowed this equality, and here there is no inequality. I mean, this is a strict inequality. So this is strict and this is non-strict is what is most important. Okay, so magically, are you fine with it? Any doubt about this?
No, sir.
No, sir.
This is very simple. This is just averaging, right? This is completely averaging. I mean, there's no, I mean, here we are not even using probability in some sense. But just see this proof, right? So this proof gives you a proof of this. Now, of course, so this is called a randomized or existential proof, okay? And there is a constructive proof of this, no doubt about that. You guys can try it out, whoever has not tried out, and one of your friends have already knows that. So who was it? Ankit, right? You have, huh?
With
Anvit, yeah. So Anvit has done the, Anvit has managed to do the
greedy algorithm.
greedy algorithm, which is a constructive solution, meaning he has actually constructed the partition. The other friend of you have done an induction.
I think induction and greedy algorithm proofs are same.
I think more or less same. Yeah, that's why. I mean, it's a basic same thing. I mean, like you literally decide which part should you put the each vertex, and you go one vertex by other. But I still wanted to give you this proof because it's a very different proof. Have you seen such a kind of proof before? In any other place, have you seen such a proof? But this proof is not just unique to algorithms or discrete math or something. This is now a very powerful proof technique, starting from hardcore analysis to hardcore algebra to combinatorics to geometry. Everywhere this is used. So this is called probabilistic method. Okay. And if you guys are interested, there is a very beautiful book on this subject by Allen and Spencer. I mean, and they are two person. Yeah. This book is pretty costly, but they are available online, free of. I mean, they're like a pirated copy of this. I mean, I should not say it, but you can obtain such versions of this, and they are outstanding. I mean, if any part of your nerve endings in your brain was excited by seeing this such a proof, then I really would encourage you to go and take a look at this book. It is outstanding. This is one of my it's a beautiful proof technique, and it's very very commonly used in this field of of in all possible fields. Yeah, this is a very powerful. I usually kind of covered this one, at least give indication to this one in my discrete math course. But yeah, so at least I got some time to here to tell you guys about this particular proof. Did you guys like this proof? Hello.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes.
Okay, good. I mean, I'm happy if you guys like it because so okay. So I have two options, and now I am thinking of something else completely while when I am giving this proof. Okay. So how many? So okay. So we were of course doing dynamic programming, right? How many of you have managed to go over any part of dynamic programming? Can you just unmute yourself and say one by one? I want to hear
Sir,
it. Yeah.
I went to 4 sections.
You read 4 sections.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. 4 sections is fine. I mean, but you have tried some problems yourself?
So no, sir, I didn't try problems. I just read the sections.
Okay, fine. Okay, I mean, I would encourage you to try some problems. I mean, so you have seen the knapsack problem and all those things, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What about, so I can go one by one. I want to really see. Let's see. Okay. Nitin Prasad? Nitin Prasad, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so did you go over any part of it, of dynamic programming subsection?
So means I just read some introduction part.
You just read some introduction part. So you have not seen, you have not gone over any of the chapters.
No, sir.
Okay,
No, not for dynamic programming.
not for dynamic programming. Okay. Avinash Bhavnani, are you there? Hello.
Sir, his mic is not working, so he's texting in the chat.
Okay, sorry. Right. Okay, so you can write to me whether you have. Yeah, in fact, this is a better idea. Why don't all of you text me actually whether you have read it or not? Okay, I want to see that. Okay, why don't you all just send me a chat, maybe to everyone also, that whether you have read or after how much have you read in the dynamic programming? Have you gone over the last class? Have you read the knapsack problem? Have you gone over the sections? Good. Okay, so I think I got some idea about what the situation is. So people have, many of you have read it. I'm happy that you have read it. People who have read it, I would really encourage you to please go, not really encourage you, I will kind of ask you to go and try to solve some of the problems either from the back exercises in that book or many of the assignments that has the problem sets that has been put up. Many of them are on this thing on dynamic programming. And I am so I was planning to go over one more chapter in dynamic programming, one more problem in dynamic programming, but I think what I will do is that I will skip that for today, and instead I will try to take another class on Saturday, and I please request all of you to at least try one or two problems before that coming. Okay, I mean, else it will be very frustrating to give it from one side and without, I mean, it will look like, if I solve a problem, it will look like, oh, fine, it is pretty simple to solve it. But it will be kind of very important if you guys solve it, okay, and ask me questions if you get stuck, and accordingly we can move forward. Okay, for people who have, so I don't know whether this section has it or not, but for people who have done it a bit, I can just tell you one problem and I leave it with you guys. It is called the, so in the graph, right, we had used this Dijkstra's algorithm for finding out the single source shortest path, right? Single source shortest path problem. But it was kind of important for us, not kind of important, it was very important for Dijkstra's algorithm's correctness that there is no negative edge, right? Now, what happens if there is a negative edge? Okay. Now, if there is a negative edge, right? So this is the graph. Say I have a U. Doesn't matter. V. So this is say 2. This is 3. This is 2. This is minus 6. This is 4. Say, can a graph has such a configuration? And can we find out the shortest path between U and V?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Why not?
We can make it as low as possible by going through the cycle.
Exactly. So because this cycle, so I can go from U to, maybe I can use this. I can use this one. I can go from U to here, then from here to here, then here to here, then here to here. Now see, this cycle is the total length of the cycle is 3 plus 2 plus minus 6 is minus 1. So if I keep on moving on this cycle for t times, my total length of the path will start going down to minus t, right? I can go down, I can run it as much times as I want, and then I move to here. So that will, I can produce a path from U to V of arbitrarily small length, right? So this
But
is,
that won't remain a path.
that will log it. I mean, here in path, I'm not really worried about the path part. I'm worried about the, it can be a walk. Okay. I mean, most of the time in graph theory literature, when path is talked about, it is about the walk. I mean, hardly people differentiate between those two objects. Okay, but yeah. So of course you can say that what happens if you don't use the same age twice. Okay, there something can be done on that also. But one important thing, but even otherwise, that if this one was not minus 6 but minus 4, then what happens? See, then I don't have a negative cycle, right? I move along the cycle, my total path goes up by 1. Since I'm worried about the lowest path or lowest walk, I should not, or nobody should really care about going on a cycle. I mean, they will not benefit from that, right? So technically, a negative edge is perfectly fine. There's no issue about having a negative edge. The issue is that you should not have a negative cycle, right? Okay, if there is a negative edge, then of course, as you told, what about enforcing that edge is not used twice? So that is one way of doing it. But irrespective of that, if I say that if there is no negative cycle meaning a cycle whose total length is negative, then at least the single shortest path, even with the walks considered, is a valid question, right? What is the smallest path between U to V? So this one Dijkstra's cannot do, because Dijkstra's algorithm is so delicately has to accept things like this that it cannot handle anything with a negative edge on it, even if they don't have a negative cycle, right? So I can say that why don't you guys try to solve single shortest path problem with no negative cycle. Here just cycle, it might have negative edges, okay, in the order E times V steps or something of the form, okay. And of course you are supposed to use, I mean, the hint is you can use dynamic programming. Okay, so I was going to explain this one, but I would say that why don't you guys think about it, how to do it, okay. Note that if you remember last time from the dynamic programming, I told you one thing, that the crucial thing is to what is that head of the program, meaning what is the quantity that you want to store, which will be used again and again, okay. And then there is the recursive part of it. So that those two things is something you have to kind of think about. It is not obvious what is what is the thing that you want to do, okay. It is not easy. So this problem I would like just you guys to think. If you guys get a solution, excellent, else we will have a discussion on that. But so I really want you guys to read section 6, try some problems, I don't care from where, either it can be from the back of the section 6 or from the problem set or from outside, and then think about this, okay. And we will have a class on Saturday, okay. This Saturday we will have a class at the same time, okay, fine.
Section 6 is sequence alignment, right?
Section 6 is sequence element. Okay, I forgot. What is the section for this dynamic programming?
No,
So
programming.
Huh? Sorry?
Section 6 is sequence alignment.
Let's nest it up. Let me just see. Hey, no. Subsection 6 is the knapsack problem and dynamic programming. I mean,
Sir, you were talking about chapter 6 and he is talking about chapter 6 in and section 6.
Oh, no, no, no.
6.6.
I don't mean section 6. Sorry. I mean, okay. Yeah, I understand what the issue was. Just one second.
Sir, can you please mention which sections we have to read in chapter?
Chapter. See, again, I mean, read at least the first 4 chapters, first 6 sections, okay?
Okay, sir.
At least the first 4 sections. Again, see, all of them are dynamic programming, okay? They try to take a problem and solve it, okay? And the main idea is to read it a few times so that you get used to that concept, and more importantly, try them. Try some problems so that you get the feel of how to approach this whole stuff. Okay, I mean, basically the concept is very beautiful, very simple, but unless you, I mean, unless you try it for yourself a little bit, it would be hard for you to do it in an exam or some kind of stuff like that. Okay, good. So, okay, so I think I don't think I will do too much of this DP, but since you guys, I mean, kind of entice me to go towards the probabilistic method direction, which is basically a nice proof technique in combinatorics or discrete math and other subjects also. I will give you another problem on a completely different thing. So this is something, it has nothing to do with algorithms, okay? So this is more coming up from the point of view of discrete math kind of stuff like that. And if you guys, okay, let me tell you the problem, okay? So the problem is that you have a city, okay? And there are n people, P1 to Pn, okay? And your goal is to make committees from this from the people or committees of the people. Committees committees are basically subsets, right? Subsets from P1 to Pn. Okay, so each of the committees, so they say I have the committee C1 to CT are committees. Okay, what are the property? Each of them are of course subset of P1 to Pn. No doubt, no problem. But somehow I have a special restriction. What is the restriction? First of all, it has to be so that it ensures that the committees can vote and there is a clear majority. The rule is that for every committee, the number of people in each committee must be odd. Okay? It can be 1 also, but it has to be odd, 1, 3, 5, whatever. And just to kind of make this game fun, the idea is that the number of people that are part of any two committee, meaning the intersection of Ci and Cj, must be even. And by even, I mean 0 also is an even. So 0, 2, 4, 6, and so on. Okay? Is the problem, is this thing clear? So you have the set of people, n set of people, and your goal is to create committees. Right? Now, I have not told you T. Now, question is that what is the maximum number of committees that can be formed? Okay. So can you guys just think about it and give me some, I mean, can you form one committee?
We can form at least 10 committees anyways.
Okay, how?
Just put one CI is equal to set of PI.
Exactly. So set of PI, yeah, I mean, so every person can be a committee,
Yeah.
right? And so every committee has just exactly one person, and the intersection is 0, right? Because they don't have any of these not in two committees. So this will satisfy. So T can be N. You can at least form N committees. Okay? Prove that you cannot form more than N committees. Note that you don't have to create I'm not saying that this particular set cannot be expanded. You might create some other things. Maybe all persons, all the 3-man subset. That is N choose 3. Right? That can be one thing. Out of the all 3-man subset, can it be there or something? Okay. Prove that you cannot have more than N committees. Okay, have you guys seen this problem before? Has anybody
No,
seen
sir.
this problem before?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. So this problem, I will not solve it right away. I will let you guys think about it. Okay? And please, one of you remind me at some point of time in future to give you a proof of this. I mean, this is one of my most favorite problems, and personally, this is a problem that changed my own whole career actually. Because, I mean, after seeing this proof, I was so, I mean, overjoyed with this proof that I could not even imagine. By the way, this is actually a Maths Olympiad so IMO problem, but the proof is a 3-line proof. Okay, and I really mean a 3-line proof. Okay, and proof is a 3-line proof, and it is so of course there is a non-3-line proof which is very hard, but there is a 3-line proof, and you know all the component of the 3-line proof, everything. Okay,
Sir,
yeah.
here the P1, P2 dot Pn, they are disjoint, right?
You know, they are people. I've just named the people. They're the N people. Okay, I mean, I didn't find N names, but they're just N people. Okay, and the proof of this that I have has a very strong connection to ISI. I mean, I personally did not know about this thing till I had gone for my PhD, and my advisor there told me. So in ISI, at some point of time, there was one of the greatest mathematicians of India called R.C. Bose. If you have not heard of him, hear of his name, you might want to Google this name. One of the greatest mathematician of India, and he was a part of ISI, and he was working for. So he was, of course, in the stat math unit, and he was a combinatorist. He has lots and lots of work. I mean, in coding theory and combinatorics and this thing. And then at some point of time, he had visited the ISI has a agricultural center in Giriti in Jharkhand. I don't know whether you guys know of it or not, where they do lots of agricultural research. And R.C. Bose had gone there. And basically, to do the agricultural research, you have such kind of stuff like you have to ensure, so you have a various plot of land, and you have to basically ensure that, I mean, all possible combinations have been taken care of for the various plots of land so that you can understand. You can do the experiments basically, which fertilizer is doing well and all those kind of stuff. And he had nothing to do with agriculture. but he was supposed to come up with some nice solution, and he basically came up with this problem as a problem, and then the other problems, and he developed an area of research that has now become extremely big. Okay, I will not tell you the name of it because the name will give you a lot. Okay, but and now it is like a massive thing in the world. But this is yeah, just please remind me at some point of time. You guys try to solve it. Okay, and when I was in undergrad, actually maybe sometime at your age only, maybe in the third year or maybe second year, I remember one of my friends gave me this problem, and I was pretty confident that I can solve this question. So I tried for 2 months and could not make any headway into it. So it was so ugly and all. Everything was coming out. And then one day I told him that I could not make any head and tail of the problem, and he just told me the 3-line solution, and that was it. I was like, wow. If that such a thing can exist, then what am I doing? This is like an area that I really want to know. Just like the probabilistic method thing, I hope that that kind of also had the similar effect on you. That what happened there? Suddenly some probability and combinatorics, the probability and the joint got merged. Here also, you will see a completely weird connection. But you will not be able to appreciate this problem unless you try it for yourself. So please try it out, and at some point of time, to remind me to give you a solution of this. Okay. So in my discrete math courses, usually I do introduce students with this kind of various other tricks to, or various other subjects to solve various problems. So these two are, of course, two of the main techniques that are there. Okay, I think I will stop now. So we are anyway meeting on Saturday. This problem is something that, I'm not asking you to try it out right now. You try it out at your own leisure if you want, and that's perfectly fine. By Saturday, I ideally want you guys to read some sections, first 4 sections of chapter 6, try some problems, and have some hands-on experience with dynamic programming. Okay.
Sir, a question regarding the assignment.
Yeah.
Can we use the perceptron algorithm with bias?
You can.
Because the circle problem, I couldn't find a solution without bias.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Sir.
So I had a doubt in the assignment.
Yeah.
In the perceptron one, can we give a boundary, decision boundary, such that if any point lies on that boundary, we will say it lies inside the circle?
So you can always assume that there is a boundary around the circle in which there is no point. Okay. Or you fix a parameter. The parameter is say gamma. Okay. That so so there is a circle such that if you reduce the radius by gamma or increase the radius by gamma, in that band there is no point. Okay.
But can we give a decision boundary, in which one of the inequalities is not stripped?
Sure. Okay. Do that, but it will be the same thing. Yeah. You can assume that if it is within the boundary, you will give me a wrong answer. That's fine.
Okay.
That's okay. But it will be will come down to the same thing. Okay. Note that the perceptron algorithm that was there originally, they were doing the right answer, but the running time was dependent on the boundary, which is something I don't know. Right? So similar things can be done over here, but it's okay. If you want, you can give me that kind of algorithm. That if it is within the boundary, the band within that, then it gives the wrong answer. Perfectly fine.
Okay, sir.
So I think many of us have also found an algorithm without perceptron.
So that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Exact
You don't,
answer.
yeah. You don't have to use the perceptron as such.
I mean, but like it's kind of a very obvious solution.
So yeah, there's no hint of perceptron over there.
Yeah, that's fine. You can give me.
Sir, in this problem, it is given that the center is 0, 0 origin.
Right.
So we can find the distance of a point from 0, 0 in order one step.
Right.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in the question number 3, where we have the Hadamard matrices, when we are doing an operation like concatenating a vector on the end of another vector,
Right.
Do we consider it as an operation which takes some time, or we are considering it as an operation with no time? Which takes
No,
no time.
appending you don't have to take any. It's. I mean, yeah. Let's assume it is 0 time.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, just appending these things, you can think of it as 0 time. I mean, order 1 would be the right thing. There is a constant amount of time. Okay, and I think that will be sufficient for you guys.
So the randomized medium algorithm we did last class,
Right.
that doesn't work if we have multiple elements equal to the median.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the kind of first thing. So in randomized median, assume that all these things are distinct, and also assume that the number of points is odd.
I mean, number of points odd, it's fine because we are just solving for the kth position, kth smallest element.
Right.
There are elements equal to that kth smallest element.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. There is a way of fixing that one by saying that how are you breaking it and all those things. But it's okay. You can assume that they are all distinct.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, you can solve it for that. Okay. Any more questions? Doubts? Okay. So if not, let's stop now. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, sir.